Missouri basketball collapsed in Memphis last night, but the good news is I think the Tigers may have figured out what they are. So let's talk about it right now. I'm Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, where you can start the season with a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. And you know what? I think Eli Drinkwitz gave us a pretty strong hint about who the starting quarterback is going to be against Oklahoma on Saturday. But you know what? I want to start this episode by talking about Missouri basketball, because obviously the hoops tip-off for both the men and the women last night were rather disappointing. But you know what? I did watch quite a bit of the Missouri women, and unlike the Missouri women, I do at least feel like the men have an identity I think that they can lean into moving forward. I think the question really remains, though, is Dennis Gates, actually going to embrace what I think should be this Missouri basketball team's identity? This needs to be a defensive-minded type of team. And I pointed out in an episode this week that I really liked and found it encouraging that was something that Tamar Bates said. Wasn't led into the question or anything like that either. He was asked an open-ended question, and the first thing he said is, we want to be a defensive-minded squad. Well, in the first half, I thought that's exactly what you saw from Missouri. Now, I thought Gates leaned in a little bit too much into the zone defense, to be honest with you, throughout the game. But it sure was nice to see a lot of length and athleticism on the court defensively that led to a lot of Missouri offense in terms of fast breaks in that game yesterday, especially in the first half too. I think with Josh Gray in the middle, one thing that we saw is an actual anchor of the Missouri defense. Just so much size, and a great defensive rebounder is Gray as well. I just think him, along with Aiden Shaw, along with Mark Mitchell, and then Trent Pierce, who was, of course, hot with the jump shot, had a great fast break dunk in the first half. But I think Pierce's size at 6'10", if he's playing the small forward, the three position for Missouri, I think, again, that just shows you that this squad can be a lot like, I think, the Florida State squad that Missouri played years and years ago under Leonard Hamilton when Dennis Gates was still an assistant. I just can remember in that neutral site game, Florida State just having length and arms. Their hands were just seemingly everywhere, suffocating the Missouri offense in that particular game. Well, I think you saw a lot of that in the first half, and you also saw a very much a shorter rotation in the first half as well. No true freshman got into the game in the first half. Also Marquez Warwick, a transfer, and also Jacob Cruz, a couple guys who I expected to get a decent amount of burn, just got limited action in the second half. But ultimately, I liked the fact that Dennis Gates shortened the rotation in the first half. I think that's something he's going to have to embrace this season. I also think he needs to, again, embrace being a more defensive-minded team, because if you're going to, I think already you can see with this team, if you try to take Josh Gray out of the game, who may not be the best for a half-court offense, he takes up a lot of space but doesn't have a lot in terms of actual skill. Hey, fair enough. I think Dennis Gates would prefer to play a five-out style of offense, but the problem is, who do you then put at the center position that is going to be so good offensively that he can make up for what Gray brings on the other end of the court? I don't see Aiden Shaw being able to do that. I don't see Trent Pierce being able to do that. And as much as I love Peyton Marshall, when he got into the game, he looked pretty lost defensively there early. That's not a huge shock for a true freshman. especially a true freshman, big guy playing his first college action in a big-time atmosphere like Memphis in a road game. That's not the easiest spot for anybody to be put into. But the point is, I think what I saw already is that Josh Gray is going to be a more important player than I thought, because when Aiden Shaw is next to him, for example, when Mark Mitchell is next to him, well, suddenly you've got athletic foremen who just create a lot of problems defensively. Now, the thing is, offensively, with either one of those combinations, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge in the half court. You get out in the fast break, that's awesome. You get the steals, you get the dunks, as Pierce did, as Caleb Grill got a couple as well. Those are all fantastic. That's great offense for Missouri. But unfortunately, with Aiden Shaw out there, as athletic as he is, he's not a shooter. He's not really much of a threat to score at this point. And Mark Mitchell, I thought, while didn't have a great game yesterday, I thought showed that he can at least take his man off the dribble. Couldn't finish quite at times. I think he'll be fine there. The shot, though, wasn't as encouraging as I had hoped to see. So the problem is, if you're going to have Gray and Mitchell as your 4 and 5 starters, that's a really far cry from Noah Gray and Kobe Brown in terms of spacing, in terms of making it easier on your guards to drive and finish and find passing lanes and all that good stuff. But then, of course, there's the flip side. This is basketball and life, ladies and gentlemen. Everything is a trade-off. So what does Missouri want to do? Do they want to score a bunch of points and be in the 180s in defense for the second consecutive year under Dennis Gates? I think based on this roster, based on the guys that are on this team, I think Missouri's got to lean into the fact that they have a lot of length and athleticism and size on the inside, not just girth too, not just vertical, but horizontal size too. Josh Gray is a massive human being, and if he can actually anchor the paint, Peyton Marshall, also a huge guy as well, the way they can anchor the paint, hopefully in terms of defensive rebounding, should be a huge thing for Missouri. And while I do think the half-court offense is going to be challenged with those guys in there, I don't know that there's a trade-off that makes your half-court offense devastating. I think there's going to be too much of a cost to your defense for Missouri not to have a center on the court most of the time this season. Really, in the first half, I was deeply encouraged for Missouri, not just because of the results, but it really seemed like Dennis Gates had adjusted to what the strengths of this particular roster are. But in the second half, suddenly when Josh Gray picked up his fourth foul, maybe his third foul at that point, when Peyton Marshall came into the game, and as I said before, Marshall looked a little bit lost defensively. Memphis seemed to go on a run there, and the shortened rotation, all of a sudden, well, there were new guys coming off the bench, and nothing against Marquez Warwick or Jacob Cruz, but when you come in ice cold off the bench in the second half, well, the results aren't very surprising. They really aren't. That's just a hard thing to ask of any player, and it just shows the real challenges that Dennis Gates and any other college basketball coach that just decides to load up his roster with as many scholarship caliber type of players as he possibly can. Well, there is a downside to that, because I promise you, as they said on the broadcast yesterday on ESPN+, Marquez Warwick is the returning scorer in college basketball. You think he might expect to play. You think he might be a little irritated that he didn't get off the bench in the first half, or maybe his feelings are hurt. The point is, I guarantee you he feels some kind of way about it, and there's going to be somebody just about every game, multiple guys more than likely, who are going to feel some kind of way about not getting the minutes that they feel they deserve. So this is a real challenge for Dennis Gates. Some might call it a high-quality problem, but I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. First half, a tighter rotation, better defense. That was all good to see, but the second half looked a little bit too familiar from last season, a Missouri team that has now lost 20 games in a row. And coming up on the program, is it going to be Brady Cook starting a quarterback this week, Drew Pyne, or perhaps Somebody else? Well, let's talk about that here in just a little bit. But first, though, it's time for our Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pooled more than $20,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going. And you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part, it's all risk-free. If the athlete transfers or does not deliver the content, you get your money back. This week, I am supporting for my Roy Player of the Week, Nick Deloach. I just pitched in $100, and I'd love for you to join me. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Nick the love and support and keep him connected to our school. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets your team up for success. Plus, don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, and enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you are entered. Already on Roy? Well, any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook and X at Roy_return on you for more information. Roy, support the players, change the game. And get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Also, of course, my #1 sports book as well. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets with a win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch during a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And speaking with the media this week, Eli Drinkwitz, I think, gave us all a pretty good hint that Drew Pyne is going to be the starting quarterback this week. And by the way, he said Pyne will definitely be the starter if it's not Brady Cook. So despite the protestations of the ABC crew during the Alabama game, it doesn't look like J.R. Blood is going to be getting his shot. And the key to me, if Pyne indeed is your starting quarterback here, the key is going to be avoiding mistakes. The Missouri defense is good enough to handle this Oklahoma offense. I feel a little silly because it felt like all offseason, maybe the last 2 or 3 off seasons, I've been praising Oklahoma's offensive line development and their offensive line coach and all that good stuff. Hey, I think all of that is probably still the case, but this year hasn't worked out for the Sooners. Lots of injuries, perhaps some mistakes in the portal and recruiting as well. I don't know. The point is the results are not there, and I also know that the Sooners have been flipping back and forth between quarterbacks all season. They've had a lot of injuries to their receivers. It's just been tough offensively down in Norman this season, to say the least. So this is a good matchup for what is at least an above average and solid Missouri defense, even if it doesn't put the most pressure on the quarterback in the conference, to say the least. In fact, they're one of the worst in the SEC so far on this 2/3 of the way through the season campaign. Still a solid defense overall for Missouri. So I don't know. Here's the thing. I felt like last week, Missouri, not last week, but 2 weeks ago in Tuscaloosa, I felt like Missouri had to play a ball control type of game, had to run the football a lot, throw some screen passes, protect Brady Cook, who was obviously compromised with his ankle entering that game. To me, Missouri has to embrace that once again this week against Oklahoma. Now, to be fair to Missouri, perhaps Eli Drinkwitz and his staff felt like Alabama was too good in general and just offensively, especially on the road, to go down there and expect to be able to play field position, punt the ball away, and hopefully just pull it out 13-10 or something in that neighborhood. I could understand that thinking, but I have to say, even if you thought that pre-game, I think once the game went underway and you saw how it was playing out, you saw the Missouri defense hanging in there and the Missouri offense doing next to nothing, especially with a 9-3 drop back to handoff ratio to start the game. That was just too much for me. It was a bad game plan, and I think Missouri, if they embrace boring football, if they embrace old man football, as Sheldon Richardson once famously said in the inaugural SEC season for Missouri, if the Tigers can play some old man football effectively, I think they can definitely get a win against Oklahoma this week. By the way, the Tigers are about 2.5 3-point favorites over at FanDuel. It's been bouncing back and forth for the last couple of days here. So it's going to be an interesting game. It's probably going to be a low-scoring game. So if you're Missouri, be conservative. Channel Herman Edwards during his time with the Kansas City Chiefs. Come on, you guys know what I'm talking about. 3 yards and a cloud of dust. Nobody loved a good 3-and-out punt more than Herm Edwards. Well, I hate to say it, it may be time for Missouri to start embracing Herm ball. And speaking of Oklahoma, former Sooner Kaden Green, now the starting left guard for Missouri, well, he got rolled up on, according to Eli Drinkwitz, against Alabama, explaining why he only got 6 snaps in that ball game. So I do have to say, though, Mitchell Waters filling in for him somewhat against UMass, in fact, playing the majority of the first team snaps in that game. Well, it shows that maybe Kaden Green hasn't quite lived up to his billing so far. I know he was a guy that Oklahoma was really upset to lose this offseason, to say the least, a guy who played a ton as a true freshman. So easy to forget that Green is still just a true sophomore. He's got a lot of time to still grow into his talents, in my opinion. But for this week against OU, according to Drinkwitz, it seems like he's trending in the right direction after he got rolled up on by a player against Alabama. I got to say, I bet he does absolutely everything in his power to suit up against his old squad and give it a go. And since we're talking about, well, people that Oklahoma was upset to lose, hey, how about Williams Nwaneri? Yes, there's a guy we've all heard of, right? Well, Williams Nwaneri and Kejuan Lacey, by the way, noted by Drinkwitz, have both played 4 games so far. So if they want to keep their red shirt, they're going to have to sit on the sidelines. But with 4 games to go, 4 games that Missouri definitely wants to win, Drinkwitz said they're both in the rotation and he expects both to play against Oklahoma. So if you think the Tigers have given it up and are looking towards next season at this point with Drew Pyne probably starting at quarterback on Saturday, well, the fact that Lacey and Williams Nwaneri are probably looking like the odds are they're going to burn their red shirt here the last third of the season. I'd say that shows Missouri is very much still trying to win. And you know what? After last night, Missouri may have a bit of a point guard controversy on the roster. Anthony Robinson with a heck of a game last night for the Tigers. So let's talk about him and Trent Pierce inexplicably not playing a whole lot in the second half as well. Some more Mizzou basketball to close it out. But first I want to tell you about Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break down this byproduct. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. It's really simple. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Also, drink responsibly, pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. And finally, you're going to enjoy tomorrow, waking up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. So go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout for 15% off. So it was Anthony Robinson and not Iowa transfer Tony Perkins who got the start at point guard yesterday. Perkins had been dealing with some sort of injury, but had been practicing all week, according to Gates, and ended up playing 21 minutes. So for his part, Perkins looked okay, just physically. He didn't have an outstanding game or anything like that. I thought he took care of the ball for the most part and did a decent job of getting Missouri into its offense. But Anthony Robinson definitely stood out yesterday, and obviously going 4 out of 5 from the field, hitting a beautiful step back three where he sort of inexplicably got a technical foul there, I thought. But even more encouraging to me, Robinson getting to the free throw line 9 times. 7 out of 9 he made. Of course, the Tigers 16 of 25 from the line. Didn't it feel a lot worse than that, by the way? Felt a lot worse than 64% overall, especially in the second half. Missouri left a lot of points on the table from the free throw line down the stretch. But I thought it was really interesting that Robinson was not only a very good defensive player, which I've always thought he has good defensive upside. It seemed like he was kind of a terror a lot of times on that end of the court last night. And the offense as well. You know what? That could be, not only could he and Tony Perkins, not only could Robinson and Tony Perkins maybe split that lead point guard role a little bit more than I thought at the beginning of the season, but also I could see them playing together a decent amount too, because, well, Trent Pierce, who I accidentally said his name a few seconds ago, because I do think there's a correlation here. Dennis Gates said, well, I didn't put Pierce back into the ball game until deep into the second half because Memphis had dialed up the pressure in the backcourt, and Gates felt like he needed more ball handling out there. And to that point, fair enough. I just would say that I don't know that Pierce needed to be the guy who was I don't know that he needed to be the odd man out there, because especially if you're going to put Pierce at the 4 and he's 6'10", well, he can out dribble most other 4 men for the most part. He's a decent ball handler. I'm not saying you want to just clear aside and have him go one-on-one in your half court, although as poor as Missouri's half court offense looked at times in the second half, maybe that would have been a decent option, or at least better than what Missouri was doing. But my point here is that it was totally inexplicable. Regardless, I totally get that. Hey, maybe put Robinson and Perkins out there at the same time. That's fine, but it's not as though you need 4 or 5 ball handlers on the court. You need some rebounding and defense and size at a certain point too, and especially the shooting that Pierce showed in the first half. Tigers just 7 of 24 from downtown. Pierce hit a couple in the first half. Only Tamar Bates hit more than one, other than Pierce, going 3 out of 7 from deep. So obviously Missouri very much could have used that outside shooting. Of course, they needed ball handling as well. The Tigers turned the ball over too often yesterday, but especially I thought Caleb Grill, who had a rough game going 0 for 4 from 3 points. But that's one thing. Grill's going to, if you're a 3-point shooter, we'll see how Grill shoots this season. Maybe it'll be good. It very well could be disappointing as well. What's more disappointing to me and concerning for the future, those 5 turnovers by Grill. 4 fouls as well in 28 minutes. We know Grill's an aggressive player. We know he's an aggressive defender. But on the perimeter, committing 4 fouls, that just can't be something you do on a regular basis. But in particular, those 5 turnovers, I'd say almost all of them were unforced and passes that were just far too ambitious on backdoor cuts and that type of deal. Going to need to see better from Caleb Grill moving forward, or else that Missouri rotation that didn't include a lot of Jacob Cruz, it didn't include a lot of Marquez Warwick yesterday, well, those Caleb Grill minutes are going to have to go to one of those two guys, if not both, if Grill keeps playing like that, because that was kind of an inexplicably bad performance just in terms of judgment, I thought. It's one thing to miss some shots. It's one thing for a guy with that much experience to show as poor of judgment as Grill did yesterday. Hopefully it's just maybe first game jitters, something like that, and he'll play fabulously well and with sound judgment for the rest of the season. But I have to say, that had the antennas up for me just a little bit. And with that said, thanks for making Locked On Mizzou your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy, the best conference in college football. You got to hear all about it. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. So until next time, I'm John Miller. This has been Locked On Mizzou.